Previously, a nation of slaves walked out of Egypt, led by a man named Moses. A young man named Joshua watched the impossible happen. The sea split open, an entire nation walked through on dry ground, and the most powerful army on earth was swallowed by the waters. That moment changed Joshua forever, but freedom was only the beginning, because the wilderness ahead was dangerous. Food was scarce, enemies were watching, and very soon, Joshua would face something he had never faced before. War, not as a slave, not as a spectator, but as a commander. An entire nation was about to discover who Joshua really was, and his first battle would decide the future of Israel. The desert was quiet that morning, too quiet. The wind moved slowly across the sand, lifting dust into the air, whispering through the camp of Israel. Thousands of tents stretched across the valley. Families were waking up, children were running between the tents, women were preparing food, and men were gathering near the center of the camp. They had only recently escaped Egypt. Freedom still felt new, almost unreal. Not long ago, they had been slaves. Now they were travelers in the wilderness. But freedom does not mean safety, and that morning, danger was already on its way, far beyond the hills. A group of riders watched the camp of Israel. They were warriors, desert fighters, men hardened by years of survival in harsh lands. They belonged to a fierce tribe, the Amalekites, led by ruthless chiefs. The Amalekites were known for attacking the weak, travelers, refugees, anyone who looked vulnerable. And when they saw the Israelites, they saw opportunity, a nation of former slaves, men, women, children, moving slowly through the desert. To them, Israel looked like easy prey, so they prepared to strike. Back in the camp, a young man walked between the tents. His name was Joshua. At this point in his life, Joshua was not yet the famous leader people would remember. He was not yet the conqueror of cities, not yet the commander who would bring down walls. He was simply a young man learning to trust God. Joshua had seen miracles already. He had watched the Nile turn to blood. He had seen darkness cover Egypt, and he had stood there when the sea itself opened. But miracles do not remove fear, and Joshua was about to face something he had never faced before: war. Suddenly, a runner burst into the center of the camp. He was breathless, covered in dust. His voice shook as he shouted, "The Amalekites are coming!" Everything stopped. Men looked at each other. Women grabbed their children. Fear spread like wildfire. The Amalekites were known across the desert. They were fast, violent, merciless. And Israel had never fought a real battle before. They had no trained army, no battle experience. Most of them had spent their entire lives making bricks in Egypt, not fighting wars. Panic began to rise, but then one man stepped forward. It was Moses, the same man who had stood before Pharaoh, the same man who had raised his staff over the Red Sea. His voice was calm, but serious. He called Joshua to his side. "Choose some of our men," Moses said, "and go out to fight the Amalekites tomorrow." Those words hung in the air. Joshua looked at him. Fight? With what army? With what training? But Joshua did not argue. He nodded, because when Moses spoke, people listened, and deep down, Joshua knew something. If God had brought them out of Egypt, then God had not abandoned them in the desert. Still, that night, sleep did not come easily. Fires burned across the camp. Men sharpened whatever weapons they could find. Some carried old Egyptian swords. Others held spears made from farming tools. Many had nothing but courage. Joshua moved among them, speaking quietly, encouraging them. But inside, even he felt the weight of what was coming. Tomorrow, everything would change, and he did not know if they would survive. Morning came slowly. The desert sky turned gold. Joshua gathered the men. This was Israel's first army, untrained, uncertain, but determined. Joshua stood before them. He did not give a long speech. He simply said, "Today we stand together, and God will fight for us." Then they marched toward the battlefield. High above the valley, Moses climbed a hill. With him were two men, his brother, Aaron, and a man named Hur. In Moses' hand was the staff of God, the same staff that had struck the Nile, the same staff that had divided the sea. From that hill, they could see the battlefield below. The Amalekites attacked first. They moved fast, like wolves rushing toward prey. Their warriors shouted, their weapons flashing in the sun. Joshua felt the ground shake as both sides collided. The sound of steel hitting steel filled the air. Cries, dust, chaos. Joshua fought with everything he had. This was not training. This was survival. But something strange began to happen as the battle continued. Moses lifted his hands on the hill. The staff rose into the sky, and suddenly Israel began to push forward. Joshua's men fought stronger. The Amalekites began to retreat, but after a while, Moses' arms grew tired. Slowly, his hands dropped, and when they did, the battle changed. The Amalekites surged forward again. Joshua's men began losing ground. Confusion spread through the battlefield. What was happening? Why was the battle shifting like this? Joshua did not know, but on the hill, the answer was clear. Victory was not coming from swords, it was coming from God. Moses' arms trembled. He was an old man. Holding them up was becoming impossible. Aaron and Hur saw what was happening. Quickly, they found a stone for Moses to sit on. Then they stood beside him, one on each side, and they held his arms up together. Below. The battle continued. Joshua was exhausted. His muscles burned. His armor was covered in dust. But suddenly, the tide turned again. Israel surged forward. The Amalekites began to break. Joshua shouted to his men, "Push forward! Do not stop!" And slowly, the enemy began to flee. The desert echoed with the sound of retreating warriors. The Amalekites were defeated. Israel had won their first battle. The battlefield fell silent. Men dropped their weapons. Some fell to their knees. Others simply stared, unable to believe what had just happened. Joshua looked toward the hill. Moses' arms were still raised, Aaron and Hur still holding them, and Joshua understood something that day, something he would never forget. Victory did not come from strength, it came from God. Later, Moses built an altar and he gave it a name. "The Lord is my banner." Because that day, God had fought for Israel, but that victory was only the beginning. Joshua did not know it yet. But many more battles were waiting. Cities would fall, walls would crumble, and one day, Joshua himself would lead an entire nation. But that story was still ahead, and the desert still had many lessons to teach. And that was the day Joshua fought his very first battle, a former slave, leading an untrained army against fierce desert warriors. And yet, they won. Not because they were stronger, not because they were more experienced, but because God was with them, and this victory would change Joshua forever. Because the young man who fought in that desert battle would one day lead Israel into the promised land and bring down the walls of Jericho. But that story is coming next, so make sure you watch out for part 3, because the next chapter is even more dramatic, and it will reveal how Joshua faced one of the greatest tests of faith in the wilderness. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and share it with someone who loves powerful Bible stories. And I would love to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me what part of Joshua's story inspired you the most. Also, make sure you turn on the notification bell so you don't miss part 3 and many more incredible stories from the Bible coming soon. Until the next story, stay blessed and keep seeking the truth.